So the chains that actually have the cash to deploy it, that takes you out of a coals and into a Target where they still have some disposable income. And that's how they're going to answer this, is they're going to say, you know what? We're laying people off. We're getting rid of we have way too many workers. We've been way too nice in the case of Target for too long. It's time to say screw it to Minneapolis, screw it to these employees that we've been keeping around just because we're legacy nice people. And, we got to get serious and tighten our belts. And that will improve margins. Will that work this year? Nothing's going to work this year, baby, because gas is going up 25% damn week. Until that stops, the rate of change is just going to be a murder thresher for everything in terms of your incremental spend, which brings it to Bob.
Yeah, so that's a good segue, Bob. How are we doing today?
Yeah, oil's sort of steady here. I don't think anybody wants to sell it going into the weekend because you never know what's going to happen over the weekend. But you've got the Trump administration pulling every lever they can to try and ease the supply concerns with what's going on with Iran and in the Middle East, from release of strategic petroleum reserves to easing sanctions on 140 million barrels of Iranian crude oil that sits on the ocean right now. And so I think, and they're trying to still bring together a coalition to work together to open up the Strait of Hormuz, although that's still going very slowly. And people are skittish about moving cargoes or anything through the strait for fear that some stray missile could hit them, and you never know what rogue,
or a super concentrated drone strike. I mean, Iran is kind of behaving rationally. Like it was in no one's kind of list of things that could happen that Iran would not roll over and they would do smart things. I mean, it's the Strait of Hormuz is a real problem. Hitting the energy grid is that makes sense strategically if you're completely outgunned militarily.
Yep. And so some of the debate going on this morning is, everything that's going on, has oil hit a ceiling? And I don't necessarily think you can argue that, because I think really what it comes down to is what capability does Iran still have to cause chaos or to disrupt anything going through the Strait of Hormuz, or to continue to attack their neighbors or Israel, anybody in the region. And I think that's really part of the issue, because now I think the U.S. and Israel is playing a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole, because they've hit the easy big targets that you can see that are there. But with the number of people that are in Iran trying to find who is now shooting drones off from their garage in some little location you don't know exists, you didn't know was out there, how many of those are there that they can continue to attack and cause chaos? And they've indicated that they don't want to talk about a truce or give in here. And there's been no regime change. I think even though Israel's arguing that the war is ahead of schedule, there's been no regime change. And, unfortunately, I think it was yesterday, they publicly executed a star wrestler for speaking out against the regime. So they're publicly displaying that they're still in control and still instilling fear into any uprising or anybody that may try to overthrow the government. They're using AI to show videos that they're actually attacking our battleships and buildings in Israel and Abu Dhabi and around. And so there's still fear in the people about really what's going on here. Are they going to be able to overthrow? Is there going to be some regime change? And that's still a big question. It hasn't happened. And I don't know if it does happen, because we don't see any real roots of that right now. Again, publicly executing a star wrestler just means that, they've still got the upper hand. That regime has still got the upper hand. So again, I think right now it's a question of what capability does Iran still have to continue to target the things that they've been shooting at or sending drones and missiles to, and can the U.S. and Israel and maybe some allies, Japan or somebody, get the Strait of Hormuz open? And I don't know that that's clear. I don't think that happens anytime soon. And again, remember, this regime that's in charge of Iran right now, these are religious zealots. They don't want to give up. This is a holy war to them. And there's still a chance of this scorched earth. It's a tail risk, but there's still a chance that they go out with scorched earth policy of saying, if we're going down, we're taking everybody and everything down with us. I think that's a tail risk, but it's something that's out there. And so in the meantime, oil's going to hang up here. I don't see oil easing significantly anytime soon. We're going to be up here around $95 a barrel. I've said over the past week and a half that wherever oil was, I'd take the over versus the under. At this point, it's a little bit more balanced, but I'm probably still slightly more over versus under. But we're not going back to 60, 70, 80 anytime soon. Now, if you look out at the futures market, the market's telling you we eventually settle out at around $75 a barrel. That's where the December, January futures contract is right now. We'll see how that plays out. But the one thing I'd point out is on the equities, I think the valuations here, the way we look at them, the valuations are reflecting somewhere around $65, $70 oil. So I think if we're at $75 oil long term, that the equities are still cheap. And so I'm not selling anything. I've said this all along. I'm not writing any covered calls. I'm not selling anything. I'm sticking with the names that I own here. And, if you said, well, gee, what if I don't own anything or I want to add some energy? I'm itching, to go more overweight. The one name that obviously has got still momentum here is Cheniere LNG, just because, as probably most have seen in the headlines, the recent attacks on Qatar's LNG facilities, they came out and said, well, there's about 15% of our capacity that we can't repair, bring back online for 5 years. So the more of that LNG capacity in Qatar that comes offline or is delayed and coming back online is a benefit to the U.S. LNG producer, Cheniere being, the obvious one at the top of the list. So, I'm holding on all the names. If you're saying, look, I want to add somebody, I'm itching to add an energy name here, Cheniere, and I know it's up like 4% this morning, but that's the obvious name that is going to continue to benefit from what's happened here in the past few days.
And I would add, if you want a little more speculative, Nexta and Venture Global both are literally going vertical. They're a little bit more upstarty versions of US LNG. It was, I think Venture Global was a early 24 IPO out of Goldman, or maybe 25. I can't remember. Maybe it was 25. But those things have really gotten off their butt here, and I think that I've heard arguments that part of the strategy of this war that's not talked about publicly is you wanted that Qatari LNG, how about the US LNG? Because we both have a lot of trains coming online starting last year through about 28, Bob. There's a big amount of supply coming online, and market share in energy is a little dirtier business than retail, Jeff. Sometimes you get into the war game.
I mean, there was some concern that we would have overcapacity of LNG export facilities in that.
That was a huge short thesis for sure on nat gas in like the 27 part of the curve.
Yeah, and so that's pretty much out the window if you've got some of this Qatari capacity offline through that period.
So in the softer perspective, what can go right? I mean, it's this has been just a clown show pretty much from the jump. I mean, they've ignored the U.S. history of regime change efforts, not a super glorious past in that. They can't ignore the fact that no presidency has really been able to withstand, at least in the midterm basis, gas prices that are going parabolic.